Lord forgive me for this trap shit. Sergeant Smack make it backflip. Telly Hank did with the action. With the Vato speaking Spanish. Frank Matthews, how I vanish. Poof. Came back like I'm King Tut. Gold BBS is on a beamer. When Fat Cat was 10 queens up. Ball off the profit, not the re-up. Fly like Puerto Rican Jesus. Uptown like I'm Baby May. Just caught a touchdown from the bay.
Well, in Detroit, they don't imagine those horrors, they live them.
A long time ago, someone thought of designing Detroit after Paris. Detroit once was called the City Beautiful. It is now called the murder capital of the United States. Of the 10 biggest cities, Detroit has the highest per capita homicide rate. Last month was the worst for killings in the history of Detroit. There were 89 homicides, one for every dot on the map. 90% involved blacks killing blacks and whites killing whites. Most of the victims and killers were men and boys. In other crimes of violence also, Detroit is among the statistical leaders in robbery, assault, and rape.
Back away from the truck.
New Yorkers are sometimes called blasé. This shooting in downtown Detroit was dramatic, but it attracted a small audience. As in many other cities, the central business district is not what it used to be. Some people describe it harshly as a zone of decay. At any rate, business has declined, with much of the commerce fleeing to the suburbs. The old major hotels are said to be attracting fewer clients. One department store cut back its downtown selling space. Another announced it will close its downtown branch. First-run movie houses folded one after another. And now there is none downtown.
But what can make a difference against the drug trade which has infested the entire inner city? Against guns, including highly lethal automatic weapons, now available everywhere. And schools where kids are greeted by metal detectors because there have been shootings in the hallways and even in the classrooms.
They'll never see me here again because I hate this school. I really do. That don't make no kind of sense. Nobody has to walk around here and be scared they're going to get shot.
Bless the hearts that bleed, that are saddened by the loss of children. We ask that you give us the strength to go on.
Joining the parents at this morning's funeral is Clementine Barfield. She didn't know Heath Fenoy, the 17-year-old boy they were burying, one of 12 kids shot in a single weekend here. But she knows what it's like to lose a son, and our story is about her efforts to end these killings in a city where bullet wounds are now considered a public health problem for the teenage population, where funerals and prayer meetings are an everyday occurrence, where parents are emotionally coming apart at the seams.
There's son after son and daughter after daughter. And where does it end? You know, I'd been to so many funerals and so many wakes of young children, and it just doesn't seem to be any end to it. My cry is, Lord, please just let it stop. Make it stop.
Over the past 3 years, nearly 150 children under 17 have been shot to death in Detroit. 1,000 more wounded. The victims and victimizers, all kids. Ambulance sirens announce the casualties. Parents never know what the next phone call will bring.
They told me that Roger would survive, that he was shot in the back of the neck, and that Derek was shot in the head.
Clementine Barfield's son Derek died. He and his brother had both been shot at point-blank range while sitting in a car trying to resolve an argument.
Yo, we back. Shit got Popalot. Mob, gang. We on our way to Michigan with it. The D, Motor City. I would tell y'all to meet us on the east side, but this shit got citywide ramifications. I'm gonna need anybody from Detroit in the comment box checked in.
Now, today I have the pleasure of covering one of Detroit's most flashy, most flamboyant, and one of the most lucrative hustlers that a lot of people really don't know about that came out of the Motor City. And the person that I'm talking about is going to be a guy by the name of Edward Hanserd. Most people would go on and know him as Big Ed. Some people would call him Black Ed. Others would call him Eddie Money. But by the end of his 5 to 6 year run, during probably the most deadly time in the drug era, and I'm sure that was due to the high level of competition that was out there, because you had guys like the Best Friends, you had the Chambers Brothers. Looking back in hindsight, you can mention the BMF or the 50 Boys. Then you had guys like Demetrius Holloway that was teamed up with Maserati Rick Carter, who the history of Ed Hanserd is closely tied to, and we're going to get into that. Now, Big Ed is probably arguably one of the youngest to be getting it in the game and in the city, because at the time of his sentencing, after his run, he was in his mid to late 20s. Now, Big Ed is mostly known as being one of the prime suspects in ordering one of the Motor City's most notorious gangland homicides that was ever carried out. And this was going to be back in 1988, and it was the assassination of Maserati Rick Carter in a hospital room at then Mount Sinai. But that's really a long way from where those two started, because when you do your history on Big Ed, some people mention him as childhood associates with Maserati Rick Carter and Demetrius Holloway. Some people mention him as somebody that looked up to them or was behind them. But he would get his start in the game at Osborne High School, where he would drop out, kind of like penny ante hustling, shit like weed and things like that. I read some places where they say he kind of got his start or his introduction to the streets by running errands for well-known Detroit gangsters like Frank Nitti and Wayman Kincaid. Now, based on my research, it looked at some point in time he was being supplied by Maserati Rick Carter as well as the Demetrius Holloway organization. And it started out with weed, but he would eventually move into cocaine as it would grow in the 80s. Now, using profits that he had made from the drug proceeds, he would go on to purchase a unisex hair salon that was located not too far from the Jefferson Avenue plant that Chrysler had used. Now, as he expanded in the game, though he was only 5'5" in height, his name would grow bigger. And that would be presumably how he got the name Big Ed. And it wouldn't be long before he was on federal authorities' radar. I read some places where he really cracked into the game right around 1985-86, but it would be in April of 1987 when he would be marked as a drug trafficker by federal authorities, when him and several other gentlemen were stopped outside of an apartment complex in California. Now, it was said during that alleged stop that the men were in high-priced luxury vehicles. Some of them were stopped with large amounts of money, and Big Ed had several false identifications on him. Now, that was become the beginning of the downfall for Big Ed. Though his name was growing big in the streets, it started growing as well with law enforcement, because not long after that initial stop in April of 87, he was stopped again in February of 1988 by Louisiana State Police, and he was driving a GM van. And during that stop, they would end up finding $198,000. He was riding with a guy by the name of Anthony Medea, that the paper would describe as a car dealer from California. And he would allege that the $198,000 was from the sale of his hair salon back in Detroit. Now, he would then again be stopped in September of 1988 when authorities would seize $3,000 and a beeper from him. Now, he wouldn't challenge that seizure, and it wouldn't be long before he was stopped again in January of 1989 in a place called Barron County, where he had a 2-day-old Ford Bronco, and authorities would end up seizing $369,000 from him. Now, authorities would say that money was broken down into $5,000 bundles, and when they put it on a scale, it weighed upwards of 52 pounds. Now, if you're wondering to yourself how big Ed Hanserd was in the game, All you really got to do is do the math, because in a span of 12 months from February of 1988 until January of 1989, he would have $570,000 seized from him from authorities. So that's not counting any other losses that he would end up taking in the game. Now, midway through 1989, he would end up being arrested with a bulletproof vest. Now, most people think about him having a bulletproof vest and might assume, well, that's just a part of the game. But the story is always deeper when you read between the lines. Now, right around that time, he was in some sort of beef with Maserati Rick Carter. Some say it was over a business dispute over the sale of some hair salons. I also read some places where they said that Big Ed just got too big in the game, and that would lead into a beef between the two. Nobody would really know the specifics and the details behind the beef, but it would lead to Maserati Rick being killed, like I said, on September 12th in 1988 in his hospital room after being shot. Now, Ed Hanserd, who was also shot during this alleged time of the feud with Maserati Rick, would end up being uncooperative with officers when trying to identify his shooters. And a lot of people might think that's just because he wanted to let the streets handle it. Eventually, a guy that some people name as Ed Hanserd's number one enforcer, Lodrick Ricky the Hitman Parker, would end up being acquitted at trial of being the shooter and the high-profile slaying of Maserati Rick Carter. Maserati Rick's longtime partner and friend, Demetrius Holloway, would meet a similar fate on October 8th, 1990, when he would be in a popular department store, Broadway, buying some polo socks, and he would be executed. Now, things will all come down for Big Ed in 1991 when he would be arrested walking to his BMW coming outside of a mall. And on May 9th, 1991, he would end up being sentenced to 40 years in prison for drug trafficking as well as federal gun charges. Only being 28 years old at the time of his arrest, he would end up serving just about that same amount of time due to that drug conviction, over 25 years, being released sometime around 2016. And with his arrest coming out of that mall, some would say that that era of drug dealer would die in Detroit. Y'all get in the comment box. Y'all let me know what y'all think. It's hard to think of a lot of people that were bigger than some of these guys that we was talking about in 1986. I guess we got Meech, but y'all get in the comment box. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Y'all make sure y'all follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, POP_A_LOT. Y'all get in the comment box right under me. Y'all hit the red subscribe button so y'all know when this real Trill Spill is dropping. And we going to be back with more ASAP. Shit got Popalot. MOBB gang.